Good afternoon, everyone. I'm on my tiptoes, so let's use those muscles. So we rise to moments that choose us. So these words, all rise. What a temptation and what a delicious carrot for a young rabbinical student, right? To dream of the time when they would say in front of a community, all rise. Now, a new moon rises. It marks a beginning. On a given morning at the beginning of the month in Jerusalem, there would be a group of women called the Women of the Wall who will find themselves in the women's section in front of the wall, what we call the kotel. And they would be there causing a ruckus. A ruckus because they've come dressed perhaps in prayer shawls. They've come to worship together as women. They've come together as non-traditional. They've come as troublemakers. So Women of the Wall, wow. One of my teachers said that one time she found herself at the wall and she saw a woman wearing her prayer shawl, and embroidered on her prayer shawl were these words in Hebrew. Let me just read it to you in Hebrew, and then I will translate it into English. Me'olam lo zaza shekhinah mekotel ham'aravi shel Beit Midrash. And these words were an extrapolation from a midrash, a reinterpretation, a creative looking of the rabbis at text from the book of Chronicles, where Rabbi Eliezer says, the divine presence did not move from the sanctuary. The divine presence did not run away, because there's this image of the divine presence just being fed up with the humanity of human beings, with how difficult humans are, with their fears, as the Reverend Dr. Otis has spoken to us in the last couple of days, that human beings are complicated, and sometimes we are disappointing. But the rabbis extrapolated that, the divine presence did not move, because as it is stated, my eyes and my heart will be there. So when they say all rise, we rise, the question is asked, what does it mean to seek salvation? For some of us Jewish women, it is to heed a call. It is to show up. It is to witness. It is to pray in public, as those of you who might be familiar with Hannah. Hannah of our biblical verses, who showed up in front of the temple, appearing drunk, swaying, perhaps keening, perhaps just wailing. So what does it mean to seek salvation? Let's go back to this verse that I brought up from 2 Chronicles. My eyes and my heart will be there, and the rabbis interpreted, the divine presence did not run away. The divine presence was not scared. In response to this trepidation over the divine presence leaving, inspiration vanishing, soul waning, they say that even though there is a sword, the eternal will not move. Even in the face of a sword, the eternal will not be scared. The eternal will choose to stand behind our wall. Whatever walls we face, the eternal resides there. There's another story attached to this, or a parable, a midrash we say in Hebrew, that the sovereign hides somewhere there up on a higher tower, watching over the workers who toil. As the Reverend Dr. Otis said today, those who prepare our seats, those who prepared the seats for the orchestra, all those who welcomed us so that we could come together and worship and common worship today. That the Almighty, that the Blessed One, the Holy One of Blessings, is in some tower overlooking, making sure that the workers who do work will receive their wages at the end of the day. What does it mean to seek salvation for a Jewish person? Well, it starts early in the morning. It starts in the morning when we hear the cock crow. The rooster's call. When it is still dark. I grew up in the Philippines, and we heard that rooster, because once that rooster started, the next rooster will chime in. And then the dog will hear it, and suddenly we have our alarms. We begin with a morning blessing. And the morning blessing goes something like this. Blessed be the Holy One of Blessings. In Hebrew we say, Asher natan lasechvi bina leavchin bein yom ubein laila. Blessed be the one who gives me the capacity to distinguish between day and night, as the rooster can. And it goes down through a litany of all the ways we are grateful for meeting the day, for knowing who I am, for being able to see, for having clothes to keep me warm, to keep me from my vulnerability. And then these blessings in the morning conclude with this. You've caused the removal of sleep from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids. Blessed be you. Hamavir siya na mainay ut numa me'af apay. They say when we are in REM sleep, when the eyelids are fluttering, there is memory. There is dream that is fluttering behind our eyelids. What does it mean to seek salvation? To seek salvation is also to harness the saving power of memory. It's right there, flickering behind our eyelids. To harness these stories, to harness the dream that you remember, and bring it into our daily story. From waking up at the dawn of time to a story of redemption that then a people can transform into ritual, into liturgy, into all these ways that humans might be lifted, into all these ways that our values, our most precious, can be passed on from generation to generation. The Jewish tradition holds story so dearly. What is the need of story in our lives? right? There's an ocean and a collective of Jewish stories that we walk in. Stories that are hidden in our Bible. Stories that we hope to find ourselves within. Those we share with other Abrahamic traditions appear as capsules. Abraham and Sarah in the book of Genesis, of Yaakov, of Jacob and Esau, of Moses and Zipporah and Miriam in the book of Exodus, Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. In all of these stories, there might be one that we identify with, because our ancestors were just like us. They were not perfect. No one was perfect. Rabbinic Judaism takes the stories of the Bible, takes biblical Judaism even further. Stories then are developed as the rabbis, as the teachers, find themselves in new lands with new patrons and hopefully with protectors. For the Jewish people, these stories are our treasures. We live to learn them. We live to be excited by them. And we live also to see how these stories can help guide us walk the walk in other lands and in other times. Walking the walk. We say in Hebrew that is halakha. Some people translate that as Jewish law. Oh, the Jews are people of the law. I call it walking the walk. Halakha comes from the word, the infinitive lehalech, which means to walk. How are we going to walk this as times change and as our generations flow from one to the other? How do we take these stories of salvation and this effort to rise? So the one who takes these stories, I'm going to answer it, is the one who rises up on their tiptoes, the one who lifts up their chest, the one who lets the light flow on their face, the one who reveals themselves as needing, as praying, is the one who sings out in the Song of Ascent, in Psalm 121, verse 1, I shall raise my eyes to the mountains. I shall look up from beyond where I am. From where will my help come? My help is from the divine, from the eternal. The one who takes these stories and then applies them to what they're going to do in their lives is taking the salvific power of rising. So what is a signature story? What is a story that you might say encapsulates what you believe in, like who you are, what your heart's yearnings are? They used to call it an elevator speech, right? From the time you get on the elevator, you land, you should be able to give a complete and satisfying and definitely short description of what your story is. So let me tell you mine. I'll tell you in verse. I am seeking motley, molting, malleable, moved to marvelous, not the homogeneous. I am of continents and shifting tectonic plates. I am of islands, monsoon rains, typhoons, roofs flying, rivers sweeping, home away from home and hope. I am also of Motown groove, born in Motor Town. I am call of prayer. I am of supplications branded not Castilian enough, or not Hochdeutsch, not pure enough, but I am of talking to the eternal and summoning divine presence. I am of formulations of forgiveness, of mercy of the Almighty, sovereign of the universe, in a form of Spanish that will reveal itself to be Judeo-Spanish. Growing up, I was, for some time, motherless, fatherless, but grandmotherful, raised by grandma. I am of walls bare of holy icons. I am a sweeper of wooden floors with a broom from the corners to the center. I am a collector of earth secrets that hold more secrets of conversos hiding. I am lifter of secrets, past portals holding heavy, heavy history. I am of forced naps on Saturday afternoons when everyone else went to the movies. I am of jealousy of grown-ups, wreaking havoc on cement and stilettos, wing-tipped two-toned brogues, lighting the night electric with tango, pasodoble, rumba, and mambo. Then on my return to the United States, I am what I learned from the choreographer, the mother of American modern dance, Martha Graham, who said, "I believe we learn by practice. Whether it means to learn to dance by dancing or to learn to live by practicing living, the principles are the same. One becomes, in some area, an athlete of God." And that is who I am. Not a typical Jewish story, but for the people that I have become rabbi to, a typical story, holding many parts of our identities with care, with humor, and with support for one another. We continue with these questions of this time. What power is saving power? What power is salvific? And who wields it? Who holds power? In Torah, I've encountered power. The power of gentleness and the power of life itself. And some of Torah that I will share with you is not necessarily the Torah that we will encounter in the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, nor Deuteronomy. And I will play with the number 4. The number 4. There are 4 rivers in the Garden of Eden, as rabbinic tradition would creatively extrapolate. There are 4 corners on the ritual garment that is a prayer shawl. In the times of the pandemic, the first service that I conducted with my spouse, Jerry Corman, and our music director back here, it wasn't until about 20 minutes into the service I realized I was not wearing my prayer shawl. I was so discombobulated to have empty seats in front of me, the synagogue just with myself, Jerome Corman, my husband, and our music director, and our sound manager, and Zoom. I forgot to put my prayer shawl. So right there in the middle, I said, here's my prayer shawl, and I raised it up, and I held it up, and I said, this is the roof of our community. These four corners represent as far as your eyes can see when you look up at the sky. Four corners of a prayer shawl. A limited one and an unlimited one. In the signature story that I love, there are four matriarchs, at the very least, and now we're pushing the numbers. There are four guardian angels, four prayer times that span the Sabbath. There are four letters in the Hebrew spelling of God's name. And there are four elements, four winds, four ways of interpreting Torah: the pshat, or the plain meaning, the drash, or the interpretive stories, the remez, the hint, the taste of, the teasing of a question, and sod, the secret, or the esoteric. Fourness reflects the ages of human experience: youth, maturity, the time of generating activity, reaching one's full power in middle life, and the challenge and joys of being an elder. The Jewish world tree, the Etz Chaim, the tree of life, passes through these other four levels of existence between heaven and earth. So these are all these fours are ways that I harness the signature stories of the Jewish tradition. But really in practice, like in truth, how do we find salvation? It's oftentimes in the surprise, in the very ordinary. One rabbi, Rabbi Hanoch Teller, tells of a generous and righteous person who volunteered to donate a kidney to a total stranger. While in the hospital, as the healthcare team was preparing for the removal of his kidney, the doctors found a cancerous growth that they removed and saved his life then. Salvation out of something unexpected and even unforeseen. I find salvation too in the stories of the Holocaust. Not because they are just history, but because it has become the story of my life too. Is it possible that a woman whose parents came from the Philippines, of two totally different generations, who met in this country, became citizens, is it possible for their progeny to have the Holocaust as her story too? So meet one. I'm your first. I'm your first, and I tell you, the women and men and beautiful siblings that I've met through the Lunar Collective, we are AsianJews.org. A lot of us carry these stories. Stories as wide as and surprising as a child born of a woman from China from the time of the Cultural Revolution, marrying a gentleman who is a Holocaust survivor. I always say we need to tell our stories, and the world needs to hear our stories from all of us. that we can be Black and Caribbean and Latino and also Ashkenazi Jewish and also Jewish by way of Sepharad, of Spain and Portugal, or the North African countries. I am witness to this because I am so blessed to call Dad Manfred Corman. So I must tell you about Manfred Corman, let's talk about salvific stories and the power of salvation and narrative. So Manfred Corman is 92. His brother is 96. And his brother, Gerd Corman, just made Aliyah to Israel, meaning that he moved to Israel. He has family there, a lot of his children are there, and he moved to become a citizen. We hear of Israel in all these other ways that weaken our knees, that make it difficult for us to breathe. But it is a place of welcome for my family. But back to Manfred Corman. Manfred Corman walks every day. Rain or shine, he walks every day. But he also walked steadily and with purpose on the morning of September 11. He was heading to a meeting in Brooklyn, coming from Queens, and on the train stopped. The news was shared that the World Trade Center had been hit, and the salvific story of his own experience as a kindertransport, a child who heard the knock on the door, whose family received the news, you have 1 hour to pack your bags, to leave Hamburg, your home, to be put on a train to Poland. The story of salvation and dedication to life, and again, life, coursed through his veins. He got out of that train on 34th Street. Yes, Jerry? 14th Street. Those of you who know New York City, it's still there. Started walking towards Queens, as many people started walking across the bridge, across all the many bridges. So his story is my story. I cannot abide when some of my colleagues say, we don't want to be defined by the Holocaust. We want to be defined by nuanced Judaism. And I just say, yes for you, but not for me and not for my children, not for his grandchildren. We hold the fortitude and we hold the courage that courses through their veins. But really, do we need to have stories of heroism? Do we need to go through harrowing memories to find salvation? I too seek the simplicity of the verses like in Deuteronomy, where they say in chapter 14, you are children to the Lord your God. Punto e basta, period. The first half of that verse is beautiful, but its continuation reflects the reality of life. In that reading, God asks God's children not to gash, not to rip their skin, not to rip our hair out when we are in grief. The verses say that God is like a parent witnessing the suffering of a child suffering from grief. and God seeks to intervene to prevent the child from harming themselves. The rabbis, the teachers, understand that when the Torah verses say, do not make gashes on your skin, they apply that to the body of those who identify as the people Yisrael. Yisrael is not just the state that we know as Israel. Yisrael is the name of Jacob. In the story in our Bible, in the book of Genesis, Jacob was trepidatious, on a journey, going to meet the brother from whom he and his mother conspired to steal a birthright. And in the night, it is said that he had a dream. Translations say that in the night, an angel appeared before him and they wrestled. The Hebrew says it was an ish, a man. Whether it was a dream, it was conscience, or it was a man, or whether it was his brother, actually his brother, that they wrestled. The result was the next day, this Jacob, who was named Jacob because he came at the heel, but he was possibly pulled out by the heel, being the second of twins. In many ways, he found himself reborn as Israel. El, God, the one who prevails after a struggle with God. So again, when the text in Deuteronomy says, do not rip your skin, they also mean perhaps that you people who identify as the people of Jacob, the people Yisrael, do not rip yourselves apart and divide into warring factions. And find a way to find love amongst yourselves. Forget about that. Find a way to love yourself. What does it mean to keep these stories alive? My husband would say to me that he's not really worried of other guys entering my life, but he is concerned. I spend an inordinate amount of time with rabbis from the 15th century. I'm studying rabbis from North Africa these days, but definitely the sages from Spain and Portugal are my go-to. And why do they pose such such charm for someone like me at this time in the world? Because they bring to life a teaching. They would say, for example, that those who study and those who dedicate themselves to learning, like you all. So here's a Hebrew phrase for you. Okay, get ready? Okay. You are Talmidei. Let's say that together. Talmidei Chachamim. You are students of wisdom. This is what Chautauqua is. This is a gathering of people who are forever thirsting and seeking wisdom. So they say that about the Talmidei Chachamim, so in Hebrew, first they say, Ein lachem menucha, lo ba'olam hazeh, velo ba'olam haba. Sort of in tongue-in-cheek, they say, some of the rabbis say that, you scholars, you have rest neither in this world nor in the world to come. Because in the world to come, so too will you be studying and seeking. You will be sparkling and shimmering as bina, or understanding and learning. And they say, may you go then from strength to strength, the strength of this world and the strength of the world that you will find in your aspirations, the strength that you seek in your dreams, the strength that you seek in the world that you wish. Again, they also say of Talmidei Chachamim, students of wisdom. Let's say that phrase again. Talmidei Chachamim. When they say, oh, Chacham, that means, ooh, wise one. Chachama, a wise woman. So they also say about those who seek learning. And all you children, that we are all children. The word in Hebrew is, and all your children shall be taught of the Lord, and great shall be the peace of your children. All your children as banayich in Hebrew. If all the banayich are taught of the Lord, there will be peace for all. And then the rabbi stretched that again. We keep stretching and say, read that not as your children only. Read that as your builders. All those who come in contact with you, so long as you give example and you share what you learn, they will become builders. Anyone who comes in contact with you and sees how you walk the walk in the world will become builders. Do not read your children banayich, but read it as your builders. So I say that your children, those who come in contact with you, not necessarily just your biological children, these become your people. Who are your people? You have your group that you've come with. Those are your people. But in the teachings in the Jewish tradition, in the rabbinic tradition, we're also seemingly alluding to the fact that there is a Jewish people. We're saying Yisrael is the name that we've chosen. We've also been called the children of Jacob, and forth and back. And there's a core premise that these people who are lovers of this Torah, who abide by the teachings of, and the traditions of, and the rituals and the liturgy that comes out of it, they constitute a Jewish peoplehood. And polemicists in American Jewish life over the past 30 years have been scratching their heads about the lack of loyalty of many modern Jews towards this idea of Jewish peoplehood. Is it a requirement? One of our teachers from my seminary, Jack Wertheimer and Stephen M. Cohen, wrote an article, Whatever Happened to the Jewish People? The argument was there was a Jewish people through history, but for the past 30 years, and really largely connected with just individualism, intermarriage, and all these things, all the vicissitudes of life, American Jews have turned lukewarm to the idea of Jewish peoplehood. We wonder these days, what does it mean to be in relationship as a Jew to the idea of Jewish peoplehood? What does that mean? Does it mean a belonging, an obligation, because they're my people? Like my people, I'm going to wait for them before I go to, before I go to dinner, right? We're going to walk together. My people, I'm going to make sure that, if you need something to sit on, I'll go run for it, right? I'll bring you a cushion. My people means I have love for my people. I have a responsibility and I have obligations. But these days, as we talk about being Jewish, Oftentimes, we say we are anxious, we're enraged, we want to hide, we are forgotten, we are frustrated, isolated, inundated, blamed, and alone. The story of anti-Semitism is also part of the story of salvation. To rise, you have to come from somewhere. You have to push against something. I am still on my tiptoes because I'm short. But I have to hold up my core. I have to push from the ground. I have to make sure I can see you and you can see me. To rise, you fall. To rise, you have to bounce back from a fall. And we are falling. We have fallen. We are falling. Our peoples are falling because we're hating on each other, left and right. How are we hearing each other, we ask? And how are we hearing you? Are we hearing each other? Are we seeing each other? Our message must hold some kind of togetherness, some kind of yad biyad, hand in hand together. All political messages are also political stories. And October 7 has become, interestingly, a Shiva. You'll see in Israel, I was just in Israel for the last month of July and also at the end of January. And you will see people wearing t-shirts that say Shiva. Shiva is the Jewish tradition of being together, literally sitting in prayer, sitting to offer comfort to a person who has lost mother, father, sibling, or spouse. There's been a question to, can we call October 7 the Hebrew date? Which is, we love to do that in Jewish tradition. There is a Hebrew date. There's a way to count in Hebrew. It gives an occasion some kind of dignity. Like the year 2024 is 5784 in the Jewish calendar. But people said, no, let us not call it the Jewish name because we will forget that October 7 is Sheva, 7, and it is also that we are in mourning. We are in Shiva. How you hear our stories, how we hear you reflecting on these stories, reflecting on the war that is still going on. This is the work that we need to do. And to continue our exploration of this week's study, and then what does it mean to look beyond the suffering and limitations of human life on earth and beyond the horizon of all we can know or understand? So we were asked as clergy to ponder this. When I think of what is beyond, I think of the blessing that was given to us this morning from the stage, the blessing of going in peace, and the hand was raised in blessing to us. So in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, in the book of Numbers, it is said, thus shall you bless the people with raised hands, but perhaps with or without raised hands. But Aaron in the Bible lifted his hands. To lift the hand is to open your saving power and your vulnerability. How other ways can we bless each other with all the names that we call our God, our eternal? sing those names. In the Jewish tradition, it's 4 letters, Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh. Place this name in the memory of your children. Another way we can save each other and bless each other is to be face to face. Treasure face to face. Treasure the heat that comes from the body of the person that's near you. And also, we bless each other when we use even a loud voice, a voice that can be heard by the entire community, but even the whisper that can actually be heard by your neighbor. So in conclusion, I can only sing. During September 11 and the week that followed, a student asked me, Mira, pray for us. I was not a rabbi yet. I was a dancer teaching gyrotonics. I was certified in gyrotonics, so cousin of Pilates. Okay. And I remember I stopped and I said, I don't pray, I sing. So Batya Levine, thank you for writing these words. We rise humbly hearted, rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirit to guide us, rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. We rise, elders with wisdom. Rise, ancestors surround us. Rise, in hope, in prayer. Rise, in hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. We rise, humbly hearted, rise, won't be divided. Rise, with spirit to guide us. Rise.